I welcome you all. If you are ready for horrifying stories of the mysterious, the unknown, and the forgotten, let us step beyond the veil. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you. Living on the Navajo reservation, my family has a chilling tale etched into our history. One evening, my aunt and her brothers found themselves home alone while my grandparents attended a chapter house meeting. With no electricity, darkness enveloped the house as they prepared for bed. Suddenly, noises outside hinted at an unwelcome visitor. My oldest uncle, investigating, spotted a figure by the truck, a bizarre sight in a community where neighbors were miles away. The figure rifled through our personal items, triggering fear. With a rifle in hand, they confronted the intruder. As they swung the door open, aiming the gun, the figure walked toward them, unfazed. Even when my uncle pulled the trigger, the gun remained silent. The smell of rotting flesh accompanied the figure's approach. The figure, now behind a tree, peeked out as my oldest uncle readied the gun. My grandfather, a man of Navajo wisdom, performed a ritual with ashes and a bullet, then fired toward the tree, catching the intruder off guard. The gunshot echoed, and the figure sprinted. My grandma ushered my aunt inside as my uncles and grandfather pursued. In the pursuit, the headlights revealed a startling sight, a woman running on all fours like a bear whenever illuminated. As my grandfather yelled in Navajo, identifying the intruder as a local woman, my uncle recalls a strange confidence in his voice. Days later, news circulated that the woman my grandfather had called out had passed away. The eerie tradition holds. If you know a skinwalker's name, it has the power to end them. The line between myth and reality on the Navajo reservation is thin, and tales like these linger in the shadows. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the Pine Ridge forest, my friend Ryan and I hiked along a narrow trail. Laughter echoed through the ancient pines as we found the perfect camping spot, a secluded clearing, promising a night under the stars. Setting up our campsite took a bit of time. Neither of us were camping enthusiasts, so assembling the tent was a clumsy affair. Ryan suggested we collect enough wood for the campfire, stating we wouldn't want to search for firewood in the dark. Although it didn't seem like long, the sun began to set as we gathered the final pieces of firewood. We quickly lit it up with Ryan's lighter. Even though I wasn't a fan of his smoking, I had to admit I didn't bring anything to light a fire with. Campfire crackled, and we enjoyed the sight of the setting sun, chatting about our lives. Ryan lit up a cigarette and suddenly asked me a question out of the blue. Do you feel like someone's watching us? Now that he mentioned it, I had an eerie feeling like we were not alone at this campsite. Come on, you're just paranoid. It's dark. We're in a forest. It's probably nothing. Try not to think about it, I said to put Ryan at ease. As night fell, we heard a whisper in the air, interrupting our conversations. Ryan and I exchanged uneasy glances. Probably just the wind, I said. Ryan nodded in agreement. Despite the eerie atmosphere, we eventually succumbed to sleep, unaware of the unseen presence lingering in the shadows. The next morning, we awoke to the crisp mountain air. Our sense of tranquility shattered when we discovered strange prints encircling our camp. As we examined the tracks, their details sparked a growing unease within us. The prints were of hooves, but something was odd. They didn't look like those of a four-legged creature. It was more like whatever it was walked on two legs. Determined to forget this unpleasant morning, we explored the forest, sunlight filtering through dense foliage. The day passed in apparent normalcy, and we convinced ourselves that we were probably just paranoid, and there was nothing out of the norm about the mysterious prints. As night fell, the forest took on a different character than the night before. A heavy fog settled, and all the sounds of the forest critters were gone. An unexpected anxiety settled in as mysterious sounds emerged. A raspy howl into the night, as if this creature's lungs were filled with water. The whispers returned, more pronounced this time. Ryan and I decided we didn't like the outdoors anymore and headed into our tents. After a while, we heard the sound of hooves approaching. The campfire was barely lit, casting the shadow of what looked like a deer. To our fright, this deer suddenly stood up on its hind legs as it slowly approached the tent. It stood right outside the zipper. Then we heard it, the sound of the zipper being lowered. Panic set in as Ryan and I clutched the zipper, trying to keep whatever lurked outside from entering. After a while, it gave up, and we saw its shadow retreat. The two of us built up some courage. We unzipped the tent, finding an empty clearing bathed in moonlight. We decided to just head back to sleep and try to pass this night as soon as possible. After some time, I found myself awake again. I couldn't possibly catch a wink of sleep. I turned around to check on Ryan. His sleeping bag was empty, and the tent zipper was open. Panic set in as I frantically searched for my missing friend, calling out into the darkness. I grabbed a torch from my bag and headed into the dark forest. Guided by the weak beam of my torch, I stumbled upon Ryan standing motionless in the forest. Relief washed over me, but Ryan just stood there muttering incomprehensible words. "Ryan, buddy, you all right?" His neck twitched in my direction with an unworldly snap. Fear gripped my heart as I realized this was not my friend. A wave of horror swept over me as the real voice of Ryan called for me from a different direction. Panic gave way to a swift decision as I ran in the direction of Ryan's voice. Behind me, I could hear leaves rustling and twigs snapping. It was on my tail, but I couldn't dare look back now. Returning to the campsite, I saw Ryan with a cigarette in his mouth, looking worried. "We have to leave now. Just believe me, please," I said. Packing up everything swiftly, we hiked back to our car as fast as possible and got in, starting to speed away. As I looked in the rearview mirror, all that I saw was a glowing pair of giant eyes looking right back into my soul. It was my first day at the fire tower, a remote outpost nestled deep within the wilderness. As I arrived, the chief, clearly a veteran of the park, greeted me. He laid out the responsibilities of my new job, but also giving me a warning. Don't venture too far into the forest under any circumstances. It's not safe. Lots of bears around. Weird, I thought. As a park ranger, thought he'd expect me to know that. Spending hours hiking to the fire tower, I marveled at the towering trees. Upon reaching the tower, I turned on the generator, gathered supplies from the nearby supply shed, and set up my station. The chief mentioned, almost in passing, that the previous rangers stationed there had left abruptly, leaving the post empty. I hoped my stay wouldn't be as short-lived. The first day slipped away as I did my tasks and made preparations for my stay there. As night descended, I was about to drift into sleep when an unsettling rustling came from the bushes below. Gripping my flashlight, I peered down to discover a deer, dismissing it as typical wildlife. I tried to push the unease from my mind, drifting to sleep. Day 2 began with the beeping of the radio. The nearby fire tower. I could just about see it quite a distance away. Ranger Joe. He revealed that some unauthorized campers were in my tower's vicinity. The chief instructed me to check the campsite and make sure to have them leave. The hike to the campsite took around 2 hours, but upon arrival, I found it empty with a fire barely lit. Radioing in the situation, I decided to head back. On the way back, the forest began to darken as the sun began to set, and suddenly a cry for help pierced the air. I radioed the chief, and he sternly advised against investigation, stating it was getting dark and I needed to head back. I couldn't just ignore this. It could be the campers from before. They could be in danger. I followed the cries, realizing they sounded peculiar, more like a heavy smoker than a terrified camper. Upon reaching the source, I saw no one there, only a deer. It looked diseased, with flesh hanging from its face and bone exposed. It raised its head, unhinging its jaw, revealing a mouth full of fangs, and then this creature was speaking, barely sounding human. It sent shivers down my spine. Without a second thought, I retraced my steps to the tower, radioing Ranger Joe about the creature. "Quit messing with me. It's late, get some rest. It's bad enough already. I don't need you trying to scare me with your stories." I would not have believed him either, I thought. But I know what I saw. My night was tormented by the haunting image of the deformed deer. The radio crackled to life again. It was the chief, inquiring about anything suspicious. Worried he would think I was messing around too, I lied, claiming everything was fine. The chief revealed that the bodies of the missing campers were found, likely victims of a bear attack. "Don't lurk out late, and keep your mace with you at all times," he said. My thoughts lingered on the creature. As day 3 was going by smoothly, I spotted a mud-covered child while gathering firewood, running along a path. My instinct kicked in, and I chased after, shouting for them to stop. Losing sight of the child, I stumbled upon a gruesome scene. A pool of blood at the base of this dead tree. Above it, the body of a child. Flayed open, their innards a shredded mess that left me gagging. Hastily, I radioed it in, and soon a massive squad of police arrived. The chief pulled me aside, instructing me to forget what I saw and to rest for the day. As night fell, the horrifying images of the past few days refused to fade. A storm was on the horizon. I descended to collect enough supplies before the storm hit. Soon the sky erupted in thunder and rain. I boarded up the windows of the tower for safety. Exhausted, I finally fell asleep, only to wake to scratching at the door. I could hear deep huffing from the other side, and then the doorknob began to turn. Panic seized me, but the locked door held against the intruder's attempts to enter. A blood-curdling screech filled the air as if in frustration. This thing resorted to banging on the door, desperate for an escape. I remembered one of the windows was missing a pane. I removed the wooden board and slipped outside just as the creature broke through. Peeking through the window, I witnessed its grotesque form, tall, lanky, hunched, with razor-sharp claws and a face with rotting flesh and exposed bone. In the midst of the chaos, the radio crackled to life once again. It was the chief, informing me that the storm was making it unsafe to be at the tower, and he was on this way there. The creature's attention shifted towards the radio, providing me with a chance to flee. I bolted down the stairs. As I did, I heard the creature stumbling around as it realized where I was, its screeches echoing through the night. Reaching the bottom, I continued to run along the trail in the pouring rain, the creature not far behind, relentlessly pursuing. Suddenly, a pair of headlights emerged through the downpour. It was the chief and Ranger Joe. Glancing back, I could barely make out the creature ducking behind a tree, avoiding the approaching headlights. As I neared the car and climbed in, the chief was confused. "What happened? Why are you out here?" he demanded. I uttered the thing that killed those campers. "It's here." Without a word, the chief turned the car around and accelerated. Ranger Joe, confused, questioned, "What do you mean, the thing?" The chief remained silent, his focus fixed on the trail. Then, suddenly, the creature rammed the car from the side and was now back on our tail. Joe and I stared in horror at the monster chasing us. The chief uttered only one phrase: "Yea, Nald Lushii." At the time, I did not know this thing, a foul being who had the ability to turn into or disguise themselves as its victims, a skinwalker. With the creature closing in, the chief handed Ranger Joe a revolver and a single silver bullet covered in ash. "Don't miss," he instructed. Ranger Joe poked his head out of the car window, aiming at the creature, which drew ever closer. He fired, the bullet hitting its mark. The creature emitted a horrifying screech, slowing down as if wounded. Soon we reached the entrance of the park, but the chief showed no intention of stopping. He continued driving, the rain pounding against the car. Ranger Joe and I were confused and scared. The chief's final words resonated ominously. "Forget everything you saw here today. Move away and never come back. We only wounded it. It will never forget our scent."